I have the privilege of two industry stalwarts in conversation with me. Madan Bahal, the co-founder and managing director of Adfactors PR, and Michael Stewart, the global corporate affairs and communication leader at PwC. Adfactors, as all of us know, is the only large agency of our country that is not tied up with another global agency. Their growth, their laurels are all credit to the promoters, Madan Bahal and Rajesh ji, and the people they have carefully nurtured. So congrats for all that you have achieved, Madan. And at PwC, Michael oversees communications, regulatory affairs and public policy. He is a member of the network's global markets leadership team. Prior to joining PwC, Michael was with Edelman. He was the president and CEO for Europe and CIS. And before Edelman, Michael spent over a decade with McKinsey, where he was a partner and global director of communication and marketing. And so the three of us are going to be discussing what the communications fraternity in India could consider in order to be future ready. Madan, Michael, thank you very much for joining me in conversation today. Let me start with you, Madan. You are an industry stalwart. You have seen things really changing, evolving, the landscape changing. What are those 2-3 things in the last few years that you've seen have really changed hugely and have made an impact on the way maybe the agency is working or impact on the client?
I think everything is topsy-turvy, and change was happening even earlier, and there was a very steady pace of change, but I think the pandemic upended a lot of things. And just when the pandemic started, I would have an expression that pandemic is a bridge that is connecting two lands. It will be called the pre-pandemic era and the post-pandemic era. And those of us who survive the bridge because it's under fire and reach the other side, there's land grab there. You can just go and put your flag anywhere, and that would be, of course, you have to be prepared for the new complexities of that land. What has changed? Complexity of an enormous kind. I mean, whether it is climate, whether it is a whole range of issues today are making the situation complex. Technology, of course, is there always as a disruptor. I don't think the human mind and the human brain is wired for that level of change or that pace of change. It's like change is like bullet train running at its own speed and ever accelerating, and we are like human beings running behind that train. So it's always difficult to catch up. That kind of complexity and uncertainty results in a continuous, it's like you're running on a treadmill. You can't be still any moment. You're still, you fall down. So there's a continuous readjustment in terms of strategy. So the half-life of strategy, if you talk in chemistry terms, may have been 10 years, 5 years, 10 years ago, or a decade ago. Then it became 3 years, 2 years. Now people talk about shifts in strategy every quarter, because you're just trying to realign to some new variable that comes and impacts your business, and it comes out of the blue. This is one significant change that's happened, level of complexity and risk. If you come more closer home to our work, your work and my work, the marginalization of the media as we knew it has been, or earned influence, has been an important thing. The trust deficit there, as in any other institution. Across the institutions or the estates of 4 estates of democracy, there's a trust erosion, and that leads to its own complexity. Digital has been a big disruptor, and we are trying to cope up. Our clients are trying to cope up. Every day we wake up and try to make sense of what's happening. But I think it's fairly exciting, so to say.
But do you think we're coming back to what things were like pre-COVID?
Never again. It's like you don't step into the same river twice, right? By the time the river has flown.
But is there something which you felt we had before the pandemic which you wish had not changed?
I wish the newspaper, for example, had not become so commercial, but it's selling everything. It's selling content, it's selling stories, it's selling bylines, it's selling everything. Okay, it's selling, I won't hurt you if you give me this much business. So what happened? So I wish that was not the case, because my whole reason for existence was, important reason for existence was that I could arbitrate a dialogue between a client or a business and a newspaper or a publication who was representing society. The newspaper is not by itself. I mean, it represents the societal interest. And my job was to arbitrate. Your job was to arbitrate. That process is a little diminished now. The fragmentation of media. I mean, today, the greatest business newspaper maybe is half its size, half its pages, half its circulation, half its number of journalists working there, and maybe half its credibility. If that be the case, then there's a paradigm shift that has happened. So we don't know where to seek influence today. Is a social media influencer any better than anybody in credibility? Yes, no. So I wish that had not changed as much as it's changed so suddenly. I wish my own people or the ecosystems that I work with, their behavior was predictable. The predictability of human behavior post-pandemic, I don't think, while we know the physical impact of COVID, the psychological impact of COVID we still haven't assessed. And people behave in some very bizarre, unexpected ways, which was not the case maybe as bad 2-3 years ago. So these are the two things I think I wish had not changed, because that disrupts a lot of things in the very immediate context that I work with.
Are you seeing the same thing, Michael?
Yes, but I have to start by saying what a privilege it is to be sitting with a true living legend of the PR community and profession. So it's truly an honor to be here with you. But I can only echo everything that Madan has said. It is the combination of changes all happening simultaneously. So there's one thing when you're dealing with a geopolitical issue, or you're dealing with a technological disruption or a societal change. But when you're having all of that happen at the same time, in the context, as he said, of everything that's changed with the pandemic, for all leaders, every day is a new set of challenges that they've never faced before. But yet you still need to be there leading, and you still need to be there having an authentic voice for your people, trying to engage in a much more complex external environment. Algorithms massively disrupting any ability for direct engagement, and what we've always been passionate about, genuine earned engagement based on the quality of your thoughts and your engagement, is unbelievably challenging today. So yes, I can only echo everything that's been said.
Well, you have seen so many disruptions. What do you feel, in your experience, always remained core at the end of the day when it came to us communicators and the way we communicate? And what is that in terms of communication that you think does not change?
So I think there's two things. Before we get to the craft, it's structurally where we sit in organizations. So apart from the CEO, most other leaders are living lives very vertically, day to day. They're dealing with supply chain. Chief financial officers dealing with the finances. The operations officers dealing with the operational integrity of the organization. And we're like a spider in the web, seeing across all of that. So that cross-connectivity that we can bring in our profession, other than probably the legal profession and the CEO, and I think we bring a broader purview than a legal view, is unparalleled. And it gives us a real voice of authority with leadership to connect dots where they may not be seen. So I think that remains the same, and I think is even more important today during this period of massive disruption. Right? When you're trying to see around corners in so many different, we can see things often ahead of leaders who are sitting in their vertical. So that's one. The second one from our profession is around authenticity. That is still the premium. It's harder to get that engagement, but working with our leaders and our organizations to find what is that core of who we are and what we represent, both from a purpose perspective and from a commercial perspective, and bringing that voice across to all of our stakeholders to genuinely engage. That is still the core of what we do. It's harder, the channels are harder, the issues are more complex, but at the end of the day, helping leaders find their authentic voice and represent their institutions is at the heart of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, I would just add to that this understanding the business priorities, that remains core to some of the things that we are doing. And without that, you really can't be delivering communication.
Absolutely.
And that remains. But tell me, even we saw a lot of these global crises, like the pandemic was one, and we had some others over there. Do you think it brought the global community, the comms community together in some way? I mean, did you see them engaging more now?
I can tell you, and I'm sure you've seen the same, the number of times that I'm speaking to my counterparts on a daily basis is constant, because we were all in uncharted territories and we're all trying to calibrate things on behalf of our organizations and our leaders that has so multiple layers and huge complexity, and we need to go to our leaders. They're expecting a point of view from us. And so my ability to reach out with colleagues all around the world just to calibrate, how are you thinking about it? How are you seeing it? What's the calibration? Is invaluable. And so for me, to give you an example, I was at Aspen Ideas recently, and we got all of the corporate affairs people who were there together over lunch. And it was a fabulous conversation and very emotional, because we're all in these very trying circumstances. And so you really saw not just the professional, the human of what we're all going through. And that creates tremendous bonds.
I mean, I saw during the pandemic time also the way the community across the globe came together, and the kind of sharing of experiences, sharing of ideas, so that we didn't have to kind of reinvent a lot of things. You could pick up what others were doing and quickly get going. It just saved time, saved resources. It really helped a lot. But what about at your end? How does that work over there? Because you are a totally Indian firm doing so well. How do you bring in the global ideas and innovations?
Knowledge and information has got democratized, the internet, and so we are a part of all the key forums in the world. We are the part of Page Society, we are the part of whatever happens in Provoke, we are whatever happens in PR Week. So we track everything. And conversations are out there in the open. And whether it's a page report on future CEOs or an Edelman Trust Barometer, it's available to me on the same day and the same moment it's available to anybody. It's what we make out of it. The context, cultural context may be slightly different, but the underlying principles of stakeholder engagement and understanding stakeholders' point of view and responding and bringing some alignment to that, I think that remains same globally. So I don't think there is any gap. In fact, we often find that we are ahead of the curve.
No, I think on the ground we are seeing that in India.
We're ahead of the curve. I mean, we often talk to some of our partners elsewhere in various continents, and the kind of practice level changes that we are introducing may be ahead of time, even in the processes that we have. Humbly speaking, are unique in the world. I don't know of any other PR firm having those processes. And those processes are not templates or governance models to do things in a particular way, but to spur creativity and imagination and innovation, so that we can customize the solutions for our clients all the time.
True. And you spoke about traditional media and digital now becoming so strong also. But do you think traditional media is there to stay for good time to come? This is what I hear from our businesses.
It will be there. It will be there. For various reasons it will be there, and I think that's not the context. It's safe to say it will be there. Has New York Times gone away? Let's say America is ahead. China is ahead of us 5 years, maybe 10 years, and the US is 10 years ahead in the digitalization, so to say. Or even the media. Has it gone away? No, it's not gone away. The delivery platform has changed from significantly print-based thing to television viewing to maybe digital, online. Yeah. But the ability to report something in real time with a degree of authenticity. I will still trust the Times of India and the New York Times for the version that they bring in. But yet, I'm used to that habit of trusting a certain point of view. So it's going to be there. The second thing is the media's influence on the social media itself. Take a small example. Let's take Business Standard. It has a claimed circulation of 100,000. Claimed circulation. We grant it. Its online edition receives 20 million visitors every month. Its Twitter handle has 15 million people. 100,000, 15 million?
Yeah.
So I don't think that is irrelevant any longer. That the power of that handle or all the handles together is huge. I mean, the online visitors to Dainik Bhaskar or Jagran, which are Hindi publications, every month would be more than the population of UK or Germany. And therefore, so they remain relevant. Yeah. And they're little marginalized now because of their own economics and their own challenges and compulsions and the advertising flows to Google and all, but they still remain relevant.
Do you see the same thing playing out globally also, or you find some of the digital platforms are becoming stronger?
I think there's a couple of challenges to your earlier point about the business models. Journalism is a very serious profession, and people spend their entire careers building their craft. And you used to be able to do that in a well-paid job that increased over time, and that is a significant pressure. The ability for large-scale organizations to have, even the New York Times, which is doing very well, and still a quality organization, to have feet on the ground in the places all around the world that they used to have, of people who spent their lives in those domains. So I worry about the quality, not because there's not the will of the journalist, but the business model to support them to do their jobs well as a true profession is one significant concern that I think is around the world. The economic pressures are everywhere. Secondly, most people are consuming the information on a device, often through social media platforms as the avenue, not directly on the website, as we were saying. And the attention span that comes with that is now down to 2 seconds. So even for great journalism to come through, and it might be captured in a quick thumb, but to actually be engaged, properly engaged, is very, very challenging. And I think that trend is only increasing. Right? 91% of people from 16 to 64 around the world, their primary access to news is on a smartphone. In India, it's 94%. And that fundamentally changes how the depth that you go into engaged news. You're getting anecdotes and quick views versus real substance, like you used to get when you sit down and cover to cover. You read the paper. It's a different experience.
But articles with analysis would still continue to hold sway, I would imagine. And that's a different...
Great journalism and how it's presented. Again, the New York Times was one of the first to really invest in infographics and interactive. They saw what was happening with social and digital, and they embraced that. And so how we tell our stories and get that across and get that engagement across has to continue to evolve. And I think marketers are not perfect by any means. They're playing catch up with the digital revolution, but I think communicators in our digital skills have been several steps behind. We need to catch up fast, because everything that marketers have had to learn about cut through, storytelling, creativity, the visual appeal of content, that is as true for our CEO survey or our Global Annual Review as it is for a consumer article.
Yeah. I mean, you talked of skills and communicators to stay in line, and let me just come to that. I mean, what do you think is that one or a few attributes or skills that communicators today really need to be putting more thought to, upskilling themselves in?
Well, I'll start with what you and Madan have already talked about, which is you have to be a great business person, right? Not enough in our profession are really deep in the economics of the business and the economics of the industries that they're in. They might be great in their craft of communicators, but the number of times that I've gone into pitches when I was on agency side where the needs of the client are significant, the money that they're putting in is significant, and no one's read an analyst report. No one's read the statements that the business has said about the transition in their own strategy. That's still too prevalent. So first and foremost, be an outstanding business person who has a craft of communications, right? And then in communications, storytelling is still central to engaging with stakeholders, and that craft of being able to find that narrative arc, of finding insights that are really valid and relevant to people, and then the skills to deliver it in new forms, whether it's social, digital. You need the skills to get the message across, but at the heart of it is still the great story, whether it's as a speech, whether it's as an article, how it gets delivered. You still have to be able to get people in the mind and in the heart.
True, true. What skills do you look for, Madan? I remember I was once told that you also check for general knowledge.
I think that's passé. I will now look at, if I'm hiring even a younger person, does the person have at least a basic research orientation and analytical competence to make sense of a situation? Something is happening, how do I understand it? Because I have to interpret it to somebody, to my own team, to my client, or to the media. So sense making is an important skill. It may be true of management in general, but to a communicator also. The crisis and issues are every day now. You don't know what's going to hit you tomorrow. The ability to manage crisis, that resilience in a human being to deal with crisis. I find in India particularly, I don't know about situation overseas, that people don't work peer-to-peer very well. They work with juniors better, but peer-to-peer they don't work very well. It results in, let's say, a blockage of collaboration. And therefore the best skills of an organization don't come to bear on a problem of the client. So how collaborative a person can be, that requires a little bit of humility, a little bit of generosity. Now these are more attitudinal than aptitudinal, as you might call it. I would look for digital competences beyond analytics. I can today segment the market in any which way. My story in Times of India doesn't segment the market. But let's say if I was a bank. If I'm a bank, for Economic Times or Times of India or Hindustan Times, there's no differentiation between, they just carry a story and whoever wants to read it, read it. But in digital tools available, I can now direct it to a borrower or to a lender. Within a borrower, it could be an individual, MSME or a SME or a large corporate. Within an individual, it could be a person taking an education loan or a home loan, or that power that now digital gives me to focus my messages exactly where I want to focus them, with the intensity I want to focus them, that power I never had. Unfortunately, most of us haven't woken up to that power that is now available to us. And while we should have a strength in the traditional media and all of that, but I think migrating to leverage the new powers, that it's almost godlike power, Homo sapien to Homo Deus, that kind of change shift is there because of digital. And I wish all of us migrate to that as fast as we can. So these are 3-4 competences: strategic thinking based on some analytical competence, ability to manage crisis, lead people effectively so that everybody flourishes under you, digital competences. These 3-4 things come to my mind
You
first.
spoke about collaboration. There was a report of ours from Strategy and it had a very nice phrase. It said, agile trees and agile forests. As individuals, you get to be agile and do a lot, but are you able to bring the whole ecosystem together and be agile is what actually makes a difference to transform it.
There's opportunities galore. You just have to interpret a problem to a client that, look, maybe I missed this out. And he says, oh, sorry. It's like a doctor showing an X-ray or a CT scan. I see a small problem here. We need to address it. And the patient says, yes, I need to.
I find one skill, and we're always looking out for that, is being able to write well. Yes. And probably that's a function of all this put together. Your general awareness, are you reading? Do you understand business? Then are you able to put it in simple English and communicate? Where is the art? That is where the art comes in. But art comes in after you actually got an awareness of everything that's in there. ESG, if I were to pick, Madan, with you, there is a lot we hear of businesses, and I think in our place also with our strategic priorities, ESG is one area which has become very important. And we hear a lot of clients are now looking for our support, and we're doing a lot in communication to tell them what we can be doing. But what are you seeing on this front? in terms of intending with your clients?
A lot more talk than action. And it's mainly driven by, it's a reactive thing right now. Earlier the social sector was a little active, but now investors have got active. So the demands are increasing from certain stakeholders, and organizations are doing this as a forced reaction mostly. Well, there are always some wise ones who now realize that the risk environment is such that if we do not build in our model itself, business model itself, ESG is not a separate thing, but incorporated in the very roots of the business. So in design of products, in design of services, the environmental impact, in the way we deal with all our stakeholders, the social S angle of it. Culture of the organization. The diversity of the organization. The governance aspect is very critical. I mean, once a governance patch comes on you, lack of governance patch comes on you, and something becomes a crisis, it takes years to come out of it. And the public, because of the internet has a long tail and a long memory. It doesn't just simply go away. So I think the wiser businesses and the wiser entrepreneurs and business people will make ESG a part of their core business thinking and model. And those of them who think long term will be able to do that. Now the contradiction is, the average tenure of a CEO, if you see the top 500 companies, is probably less than 3 years now. How does long term thinking come? Each CEO brings in his new strategy, new philosophy, new culture, and it's all the time a round robin happening. So long term thinking to that extent becomes the playing to the shareholders. And the shareholder activism, you don't perform for 2 quarters, somebody is moving a resolution against you. So these are contradictory forces, but I think society will demand more accountability. Stakeholders, including employees, millennials, all of them are wanting to work for organizations that, so ESG, not compliance, but ESG as a way of life will become a significant competitive advantage. And therefore, for your own good, businesses should do it.
And what do you see, Michael, as the role that we as communicators could play in driving an organization's agenda on ESG front?
Well, again, just building on what's been said, I think identifying the rationale for what this is about. Again, right now it is very reactive. If you just look on climate, right, it's under pressure for net zero commitments. It's not focusing on new business model creation. It's not focusing on adaptation and thinking about the risk that an organization faces, right? The governance is not linked to the E and S, so the incentive alignment to actually deliver, there's all kinds of things. So I think our biggest role is to show that mirror of societal expectations, because that is our job, to be connected to society and broader stakeholders, and make it clear that, one, this is real. This is a sea change of expectations, certainly for the employees, but more broadly, across the world, and including investors, who at a minimum from the risk side are seeing this as serious portfolio de-risking at a minimum, right? And so right now I think it's reacting to noise, and our role is to help ratchet this up the leadership agenda, make sure it's understood that it's long-term, that it's interconnected, that it's core business. This is not periphery, core business. And then how do we actually embed it through all the things that we're doing as a leadership team?
Madan, what do you think the PR fraternity could be doing to stay relevant, to be fit for future?
I've been running this thing in my organization called annual change meeting. We used to have an annual general meeting 10 years ago. It got changed to annual change meetings. So we decided 2 aspects of things that should change about Adfactors, about our firm. As much as I preach, there is such a huge lag between preaching and practice, adoption of the change, that remains my single biggest angst, reason to feel sometimes frustrated. That when you see the train coming onto you, whether you're to migrate on digital, whether you're to migrate on analytical competence, whether you're to migrate on anything else, the writing is on the wall. People are willing to suffer, become redundant. That redundancy is the biggest risk. And 2 years have shifted the scales in such an important way that I don't know the templatized solutions that we were used to all our life are relevant any longer. It's just that because there are no options, I have to hire whatever is available. I have to work with whatever is available. But are we fit? There's a fit and proper term in finance, in terms of, let's say, fiduciary. Are we fit and proper? I think there's a huge lag. And I think in that transition, public relations with maybe human resources, this is an opinion, so don't hold me to it, maybe at the bottom of the food chain.
What do you mean by that?
Because there's no effort. I mean, one of the questions, for example, I normally ask people, I interviewed easily about 500 people in a year. And that's a function I kept to myself, also because I learn. One question I asked them, have you read a single book on public relations since you joined the profession of public relations? Single book on public relations. What would be the answer in this market, at least? I don't know the other markets. 99% of the people have not read a single book on public relations. Then they say, I learn on the job. Theory has to precede practice. Practice has to enrich theory. If that continuous knowledge acquisition, and my question is very basic, I'm not talking about do you read a wide perspective, do you need sociological changes happening in society, how the human psyche is changing. I'm not asking any of the complex questions, but even that is not there. If a person today in the business of public relations isn't well read on what are the various influences impacting business or disruptions impacting business, how will you advise? So if you are in consumer communications or brand communications, maybe the job is a little easier. If you are in reputation, if you are in advocacy, if you are in crisis, the ability to make sense of very, very complex things that are happening. So you have to be well read. You have to. We ran some foundational courses on what is market research. But the level of research that is being used to come to any problem definition or to develop more solutions. I mean, your business or my business, we are both professional services. Our definition is developing customized solutions to unique client problems. That effort or that commitment to identify the unique client problem or develop a variety of solutions and then choose the best option, that commitment is not as high as it should be. And I think the sooner we realize this, and those of us who do it will have a job that can pay 10x 5 years later, and those of us who don't do it wouldn't have a job even at half the price. As simple as that.
Very true.
Completely agree.
Very true. So I think that holds for everybody. But anything else you want to add in terms of how communication leaders or the fraternity could be making a better impact?
No, just to build on that, I think understanding the theory of what we do and developing the craft is incredibly important, right? And too often, I've even rebranded what we call it at PwC to corporate affairs, and that's the signal to something that it's a different thing than what you will typically think of when you think of PR and communications. It shouldn't be that way, but we have too many professionals who are quite frankly too complacent with the skill set and not learning at the pace of change in the world is demanding.
Very true. I think I would just add one, but that's not just for us, that should probably for any leader, is the people centricity. And at the end of the day, it is, are you able to energize your team and then do everything that we are saying, how do they stay relevant, how do they read, general awareness and everything else that we're talking about. But that level of energizing, that whole aptitude in the leader to be able to do that.
Well, I love your example that, from strategy and the agile tree, agile forest, right? Yeah. I mean, that is that is fundamentally our job. Is we need to be agile as individuals. But to your point, unless you can be collaborative and build that forest, that's the way you're going to have impact at scale in any organization, not as a sole contributor.
I have some empirical evidence. A team leader goes for a pitch along with her team, vertical. The chances of them winning an account in a multi-agency pitch, let's say, is 1:25%. That team goes with our ESG team in the same meeting, with our capital market team in the same meeting, or the individual, one person from that meeting, the public policy person in the same meeting, the social impact person in the same meeting. When these disciplines come together and we present a joint perspective, our chances of winning turn to 90%, 80%.
Not true. I think that's the same thing.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's true for all professions. So our strategy, at its core, we call a community of solvers, because historically, like most professional service firms, an individual goes and sells their capability to a client. And that's a very vertical thing. It might be the best in the world, but it's a vertical. And client problems today need deep, multiple verticals and horizontal bringing together. And that's the magic, right? Yeah. That if you can do that, you will win as a professional service firm. It's hard, but it's necessary.
It is a very complex profession. I mean, to be fair to the public relations, and let's be kind to them for a minute. If you take law as a professional service, a lawyer typically practices one law in one kind of court, has done a course in one kind of a school with one kind of curriculum nationally or maybe internationally. Yeah. Right? It's much easier to become a serious expert in one very narrowly sliced area of work. So is consulting. You have a chemistry practice, this practice, or practice of tax, and tax is further divided into indirect tax and direct tax and some other tax. It's easy to develop expertise of that kind over a period of time. But public relations practitioner has to know everything. Yeah. So from anthropology to sociology to history to culture to politics to economics to law to litigation, yeah, to media to social media to digital.
And to have the calm. To be able to manage
and crisis. Then have the resilience. So to be kind to this profession, it's one of the most complex practices.
Completely agree.
And therefore, and yet, because we are chosen to be here, it becomes our responsibility and our duty to live up to that mandate. Yeah. And that requires, therefore, that maybe a 1-2 hours commitment every day to just keep up with things. Only then can we serve better.
Yeah, very well said.
I think one of the things, and you said in the beginning also, that crisis is something that we all do and handle. So for communicators, any 1 or 2 advice you'd like to give that way to prepare for crisis? What is it that you should be doing before? How do you prepare better to handle?
Yeah. Crisis modules or crisis trainings are available by the plenty. Right. And yet how many people in public relations would have actually formally done a course of that kind? Though I don't know if it can happen tomorrow. Maybe it can happen in the next 5 minutes. Maybe now I'm talking and some crisis is already unfolding. So learning the basics of that is a good starting point for any individual, young or old. You cannot manage crisis till you have managed the crisis. So getting deeply involved into when it's a, let's say, wrong term, but when an opportunity comes, jump into it and provide that comfort and do what best you can. But if you were to, there are very straight ground rules. So much more capable.
True. Michael, do you want to add to that?
No, I completely agree with that. We talked about this yesterday, the anticipatory and identifying, ranking them of which are those that are going to be the most damaging and focusing your energies on
or frequently appearing.
Exactly. But then also, I'm constantly surprised that even in organizations where dealing with an issue, let alone crisis, regularly happens, the lack of just rigor of the process and stages and sequencing. It seems like every single time you're making up Who do we have to contact when? Who has decision rights on this? Who has to see what? And while you're trying to mentally get into the details of it, there's all this process swirl. It just boggles my mind. So just doing the dry runs, the practice runs, crisis hits, here's what happens, and make sure every stage of the way, who's making the decision, what the communication flow looks like, what are the messaging you can already have done that don't have to be tailored, which ones have to be tailored. All of this stuff can be much more rigorously prepared in advance.
Okay, let's have some fun now. So I have a rapid fire round. So I will take the word and you tell me what is the first thing that comes to your mind. Michael, let's start with you.
Okay.
Crisis.
Cool head.
Okay. Brand.
The promise and the delivery of the experience.
Social media.
Constantly evolving.
Thumb stopping. We spoke of this yesterday.
Thumb stopping, yes. Constantly evolving. So thumb stopping is minimal attention span, how to break through.
And internal communications.
The heart and core of what we do. Because our people are our ambassadors. They're what's going to get you through the good, the bad, the ugly, and too often overlooked as the most important audience, because if you lose that, everything else is lost.
True. And corporate affairs.
An integrated view across all stakeholder groups, trying to find where you need that line of consistency and where you need to tailor.
And finally, any new hobby that you picked up?
A new old hobby. So I'd stopped playing guitar for many years, and during the pandemic I had the time to actually be in my house a bit more and picked up my guitar and started playing again.
Right.
Very therapeutic.
Lovely. Madan, for you, we start first with media relations. One word comes to your mind.
Critical till human beings and media exists. And if you have all other skills and you are not good at this, you are challenged.
I think this is one thing which in pandemic, even though everything was digital, but I personally felt that we really missed out on that, getting to meet people and spending time with people and building the relationship. I mean, that's core to it.
There's a trust between a public relations professional, whether on the corporation side or the agency side, and the journalist. It's very critical to interpret a point of view, because you as a messenger have a credibility of your own, and when it combines with the corporate that you represent, then I think the job just gets better and you produce better outcomes.
So digital, one word that comes to your mind.
Omnipotent, omnipresent.
True. Brand.
Character.
Good, nice one. And crisis.
Happening right now.
Okay. And any new hobby you picked up?
I have gone back to travel. I love travel. So the 2 hours on a flight or the 8 hours on the flight are my greatest advantage. And then spending some time with oneself every day is a new thing that's now happening more consistently. So spending 20 minutes just in quietude, I think, so more, I'm a little older than Michael is. So one is trying to get more inward than outward.
Thank you very much, Madan and Michael. I think this was a privilege for me to get to talk to both of you.
It's my privilege to be with you and with Michael.
Likewise. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
And I'm sure for all communicators who get to hear you, I mean, there's so many things you said in terms of how things have evolved. And I think the whole role, how much it has evolved, is what we're hearing from you. And how they can stay.
And it's an unbelievably exciting time for our profession. Challenging, but
very challenging, but
never
interesting.
Never been a better time to be in our profession.
So as I say it internally in our organization, that we are dealing with two sides of one coin: existential threat, exponential opportunity.
Very well said.
Coexisting at the same time. It depends on which side of the coin we.
True. Very true. Great note to end on.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Nandini.
Thank you.